So I think this division plays out in the Palestinian context. And unless, if the Israelis withdraw from the West Bank, as Mahmoud Abbas is demanding, then he is finished. It's a strange thing for him to demand because the Israelis are protecting him. If he gets his way and the Israelis withdraw, and we'll see it happen, but should they do so, then Hamas takes over and there's no more debate. Hamas rules Gaza and the West Bank. But as the Israelis are likely to stay in the West Bank, Mahmoud Abbas or his successors are likely to continue to represent this Sunni status quo. So the difference, I think, will stay there for many years to come.
So my name is Leonard Schulz. I have two questions about Qatar. One is, how does Qatar's politics influence what's happening in the Middle East? And the second question is, how can it be that this small country has a waste amount of money? Could it be that they are also investing Iranian money, getting money from Iranian to invest in their own name?
Well, the second question is fairly easy. No, Iran doesn't have money to throw around. Qatar does. It has, it shares a huge gas field with Iran. It has a native population of 225,000. It is really small. And a foreign worker population brings it up to 2 million, but it is a tiny population. And they have huge amounts of money, and huge amounts of money available for use. So that part's easy. The more difficult part is, what are they doing, and what are their goals? I remember there was a joke, as long ago as the 1980s, that there are 3 great powers in the world. The United States, the Soviet Union, Qatar. Before the fall of the Soviet Union. So the Qatari ambitions have been around for a long time. Al Jazeera emerged in 1995, big impact. Qatar was friends with everybody, trade with Iran, trade office of Israel, hosting Al Ubaid military base for the United States. You name it, everywhere. It seemed to be something that was connected to the former ruler, Hamad al-Khalifa. But he was pushed aside at the age of 62 by his 32-year-old son, Tamim. And people thought it was about Europe. People thought, well, it's going to calm down now. Because Hamad and his foreign minister were out. But Tamim is even more active and more ambitious and engaged everywhere. Every Muslim see, for example, the Palestinian context, the Syrian context, Yemeni context, Libyan context. They're buying and building. I live in Philadelphia, and we have a direct flight from Philadelphia to Qatar. I think it's pretty amazing. We don't have a whole lot of flights like that. It's unique. I don't know how well it's doing. We started 5 months ago. Names everywhere. One's presumption is that they think that having this aggressive foreign policy, aggressive economic policy, and I mentioned before support for the Turkish government, is going to save them, is going to preserve them, is going to diminish their vulnerabilities. I don't exactly see how, because they're irritating everybody, and they're surrounded by Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia. It looks to me like they're very provocative. It's a mystery to me. I'd love to hear if anyone can solve this. I've really not heard anyone able to explain what other Qatar is doing. I can understand Abu Dhabi and building the world's highest building, and indoor skating rinks, and tourist attractions, and huge airline. It makes sense, but they stay away from controversial things. They don't have their airplanes. They're not buying airplanes and living in them. I think that the Qatari government, the Qatari emirs, the father and now the son, may be engaged in a very huge mistake. They will really regret, because they're poking everybody in the eye and making trouble. And they're not in a position to do that. It's not really a smart policy for a tiny country with no military strength and a huge gas field. So I don't understand.
Any more questions or comments? Yes?
Okay. Thank you very much for your great speech. I'm Mr. Yang from China, and currently a guest researcher at ISDP. And I have a question. As we know that Sweden has officially recognized the occupied state of Palestine last month, and is actually the first Western European state to recognize the territory. And I don't think, I want to know if you have any prediction about are there any followers in the in the EU member states because Israel has a strong action to recall its ambassador to Sweden, and the US has expressed its disappointment by saying that it's too soon. So do you have any expectation for this situation? Because some observers think that maybe there are some followers in EU members to recognize Palestine in the next 1 or 2 years. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the kind words. I don't know European Congress well enough to be specific. Clearly there was this overwhelming vote in the UK Parliament. There was one in Spain, or there will be one in Spain? No. But in Spain it's also going that way. It could be the same in other states. But so far, no other state has followed, and in particular the Scandinavian countries have said no, they're not going to follow. I don't think it's enormously important. The Arab-Israeli conflict is something that gets a lot of attention. Everybody knows about it. It's an old conflict. All our lives it's been there. There's no one older than this conflict, or you'd have to be over 100 years old. It's been there all our lives. We all know it. It's familiar. And people really focus on small things. In the United States now, you may have noticed, an author by the name of Jeffrey Goldberg published an article about a week ago in which he quoted an unnamed Obama administration official insulting Benjamin Netanyahu. Unnamed. We don't know who it was. He could have made it up for him. This has caused a crisis, or perceived crisis, in U.S.-Israel relations. And yet, it's clearly a minor thing. So somebody says a nasty word, vulgar word, about Netanyahu. These things happen. They're not good. I don't see the Swedish recognition of a state that doesn't exist as particularly important. I don't even think, there are many other indications. There's a Norwegian grocery store chain that wouldn't carry Israeli goods and so forth. I won't dismiss this as unimportant, but the Israeli economy doesn't depend on oranges from Norway. So every one of you, I'm sure, carries a smartphone. If you don't want Israeli products, you have to throw this out. We're in here. It's much more important than, like I said, Apple is more important than oranges. You can't avoid it. Medicines, high-tech, security things, there's always an Israeli component. So I don't look at this as something all that. What's really important is not views and not arguments and insults in the United States or what the Swedish government decides. What's really important is what's happening there in the region. And as I suggested before, not much is happening there. A conflict takes place for 50 days. Nothing much has changed. There'll probably be another one in 2 years. Nothing much has changed. What has changed, I might say, is that the Egyptian government has had enough with Hamas. And as you may have noticed, has created a half-kilometer no man's land. They just bought houses from Egyptians and destroyed them. in the last few days. And this will mean that Hamas cannot get arms, cannot build an infrastructure for war. And so that might reduce the Hamas capability to make war on Israel, which is a significant change. So that's something that's taking place in Egypt that I think is really, in a way that Swedish recognition of Palestine is not correct.
Thank you. Any other question? Yes.
Ozan Sardaroglu, visiting research fellow at ISDP. I would like to ask a question about the Syrian and northern Iraqi Kurds. As an expert in the region, how do you believe that the Islamic State has played a certain catalyzer as a community building between the two competing Kurdish communities? But we know that Al-Muslim and Barzani families, they have been in a certain competition concerning the leadership of the region's Kurds. Do you believe that the IS will stay in the Kurdish regions longer? And when it withdraws, or if it withdraws, do you believe that this competition can emerge again in the region?
Thank you. I think what ISIS has done is to bring the Kurds together as they never have been before. The drama of Iran has involved all Kurds, and they're now working together. As you probably know, the Kurds of Turkey and the Kurds of Syria are aligned against the Turks of Iraq. But because they're a mortal region, the Kurds of Iraq have, in some numbers, symbolic numbers, a few hundred, have been allowed to go through Turkey to the Syrian, Rojava, to the Syrian area, Kurdish area. More important than that, I think, is a sense that Kurds have a common problem. And there was violence in Turkey over it, some 40 people died. There was violence in Iran over it. Iran has a significant Kurdish population. And some, I think, 11 people died. So what you have for the first time ever, I think, is a pan-Kurdish issue. All Kurds, Turkey, Iran, Iraq, Syria, are concerned about Iran. And this has the potential to change Kurdish mentality. There's more of a sense of unity, more of a sense of having to help each other, that I think is likely to help the Kurds build eventually a unitary state, a single state. We already have in northern Iraq a proto-Kurdish state that is doing well. You're right about the competition between the Taliban and the Barzanis, and it has been a problem. But overall, they've managed it within certain boundaries. It has not turned into a bloody civil war. And Kurdistan in Iraq is successful in a way that no other part of the country is. And since it got its effective independence in 1992, it has built up the economic infrastructure. It now has a pipeline going to the Mediterranean. Interestingly, the first delivery of Kurdish oil went to Israel. It now has universities. It now has urban centers. It now has a political sophistication. It has relations with the Turkish government, which are quite good. So it's a success story. It is the success story for Iran. The Kurds of Syria want to do something similar. Of course, they're being attacked by ISIS, but potentially this could happen. The Kurds of Turkey are in a new phase and active and watching. Kurds in Iran are still quiet, but that could change too. So I'm enthusiastic about this. I think the Kurds missed their opportunity at the end of World War I. The period between 1913 and 1923 was the key era of modern Middle East. It's when everything changed. The collapse of the Ottoman Empire and so many new states emerged. And in some sense, we are still working out the implications of the Treaty of Sèvres and the San Remo and Sykes-Picot and all these other European diplomatic instruments. The Kurds missed. They didn't have intellectuals, they didn't have politicians, they were mountain people that weren't properly represented in their Paris Peace Conference, and they missed out. And now, a century later, they have reached the point where they have the military power, intellectual power, economic power to start building a real estate. And I'm in favor. I think they deserve it, and I think it'll have positive impact in the region for the state. So I want to see us. I'm happy to see that my government is to some extent now helping. The German government is helping the Kurds.
Any other question? Just one. You mentioned U.S., Germany, and other countries. Does Russia play any role in the region? How would you describe Russia's analysis and ambitions with the region? We are obsessed with Russia in Sweden, as you know.
I just came from Poland, but they're similar. Obviously this is not the Soviet Union. It's not a grand ideological the best way I could describe the Russian government policy in the Middle East, in particular in Syria, is to say it is to annoy the Americans, to take the other side. There are, of course, other issues. There are the Orthodox Christians. There is the gas. There is the great power ambition. But it doesn't lead to a consistent foreign policy. The Russians, most importantly, are supporting Assad in Syria. But where is this leading them? I mean, is it because of this little, it's not even a base in Tartus. It's a facility. It's hard to imagine this little thing is what connects them to Assad, or the Orthodox population, Orthodox Christian population. It's hard to imagine. I mean, historically, the British were patrons of the Protestants, the French were patrons of the Catholics, and Russians in the 19th century patrons of the Orthodox, and it still remains. There's still a connection between the Russian Orthodox Church and the various Orthodox churches of the Levant. So it's a bit of a chaotic policy. And now with Ukraine, I don't think that this is a priority anymore. Something much more important, closer to home. And Russia's not really playing at this point. It gets in the way of resolutions that Western powers want to bring to the Security Council. I don't think it's, that's not where its attention goes. Thank you very much.
If there are no other questions, I want to thank Dr. Piper for sharing your analysis and your insights with us. Thank you very much. And thank you all for coming.
感不感兴趣啊？对中东？